And the recording has begun.
All right, Tony, thank you so much for being interviewed.
I'm excited. All right, right out of the gate, true confession on, I saw the concept of I saw a post about your podcast on social media, and I loved the idea. And of course, when you kind of see the title, Marriage Theraoke, I'm thinking, okay, I got to go look this up. And I was afraid of it. I was almost afraid that you might reach out someday, because my immediate thought was that I'm going to end up having to sing. So has anybody already told you that? I mean, has that been a fear?
No, we never make our guests sing. That would be terrifying. I don't even sing.
Well, and that's what, so then when I started kind of, okay, I'll start listening to some, and then it was, oh, the guest doesn't sing. And I think I even told my wife that it's like, hey, this is a really cool podcast, but I'm afraid of it, and then sure enough, when you had reached out, I thought, okay, I got to conquer my fears. It's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm ready to sing. So thankfully I don't have to. Right?
Thank you for being willing.
Sure. Yep.
That's fun. No, singing is one of my greatest fears, so I can relate. Okay, so Tony, tell us about what you do and who you are, and all about your awesome podcast.
Oh, you're very kind. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a very old man. I just turned 49. Isn't that wild?
So old.
So old, right? When I was young, 49 was like, that was really, really old. And now I'm that old guy that's saying, I feel great. I could still do something. Although last night, actually, I was, maybe I was making fun of, that's a very dramatic phrase, but I was commenting on the way that someone happens to walk. But it was very humorous in my home. And I literally pulled a neck muscle. And so my wife, she was like, see, that's what you get. And I thought, wow, is that what happens when you get older? But I'm a father of 4. My kids are 14, 16, 18, and 20. I've been married for 28 years, and I did my first 10 years in computer software. Thank you. And I wasn't passionate about my job. And so I went back to school, became a marriage and family therapist, and one of the greatest decisions I ever made, even though it took a long time and it was scary and that sort of thing. But man, I love what I do, and I have a podcast called The Virtual Couch. And started that. I think I'm on episode 95 or 96, and just started that as something just labor of love, and I started just feeling so passionate about topics about parenting and couples communication. And then I work really heavily in the world of addiction. And I just felt like, man, people need more hope there. When you got to get rid of guilt and shame, and we got to kind of identify what addiction really is about, and people aren't horrible, all those things. And so that was kind of what led me to creating the podcast. And boy, that's just been a blast. And then I have an online pornography addiction recovery program called Path Back Recovery, or it's pathbackrecovery.com. And it's a real strength-based, model that's just helped a whole bunch of people kind of put that in their rearview mirror once and for all. So that's me.
You're doing so much good in the world, Tony. My hat is off to you. I love your podcast, which is saying something, because when Rich and I were first thinking about starting a marriage podcast, we kind of were like listening to a bunch of them and different things. And I was like, oh, these are such downers. They're so heavy, and they're so like, I don't know, but I loved yours because it was both helpful, and you remain, I don't know, engaged, upbeat. It's interesting. I've always been very impressed with your podcast.
I appreciate it. I do. And that's what I'm digging about yours too. Actually, I love, you guys are obviously creative. I feel like that's the part I miss out on. I can get all excited and preach and that sort of thing, but sometimes I'm like, I need to do something cool, like sing a song or tie it together like that. So no, I love it. I know now we're gonna sound like we're doing the whole cliched and gushing, but I mean, I really do feel like there's the more podcasts, the better that are helpful, and kind of can't get enough of it. A lot of people have a lot of downtime. Even though I know we live in this world where everyone is busy, but I think if we look at the amount of time that we do spend on whatever, social media, binging on Netflix shows, doing that sort of thing. I like the concept of where, we have things like your podcast, hopefully mine, that are at least kind of keeping people engaged and hopeful and learning new tools. And I just love the whole podcast movement. I do.
Absolutely. I do too. Okay. So do you mind if we jump into today's topic?
Let's do it.
Okay. So topic today is being married to a narcissist. So we're going to kind of talk about being married to a narcissist 101, the do's, the don'ts, but we got to first off start by defining narcissism and maybe also just personality disorders in general.
Yeah, so this is, and it is interesting. This is one of those, again, where I never saw myself when I started down this path of working so much in the world of personality disorders and narcissism. And as quick as I can, get there, working with men and addiction, I start recognizing that addiction's really kind of not feeling connected, whether not feeling like they're a good enough dad or husband, or they don't like their careers or their health, or they're not connected in their faith, or they're any of these things. And so then when they don't feel good about something or themselves, then they turn to addiction. So that led me to start doing a lot of couples counseling, which I never thought I would do. And now I love couples counseling. And couples counseling, I'm a big fan of this modality called EFT, emotionally focused therapy. It's this evidence-based framework, this modality that just works, and it helps people feel like they're safe and that they can communicate to their partners, and their partners know what to do with it. They listen with empathy and understanding, and we learn more about our partners, and we feel like we can just, go to our partner with anything that's on our train of thought. But then when I start doing more of the couples counseling, you'll see, 5 or 6 sessions in a day, and it's just going really well. And all of a sudden you'll have one where something's just not happening here right. And typically somebody's, in EFT world, they say you're putting out an emotional bid. I'm sharing a little bit of my heart with my partner. And it's this touching moment when your partner says, "Oh my gosh, tell me more. And I never realized that. And thank you for sharing." And that makes me understand, when I respond, this is what you do. And then all of a sudden you get one where it's like record scratch. Okay, see what I did there? That's a pun, kind of, right? Because of the whole
yeah, there you go. Good job.
So the record scratch, and then it's like, wait a minute, person just put out their emotional bid, and now their partner's just saying, "Sorry, I don't buy it." And do you know what this is like for me? And and at first I'm thinking, what is going on? And so then you start really looking at, okay, what is happening there? And you'll pull that person aside, you start doing some individual sessions, and you really learn that sometimes things like empathy are a little bit of a challenge, or the person just at their core feels like they're not heard. And so, even though I've got this modality, this model that I know works, and I'm preaching it, and there's books about it and podcasts about it, it's almost like the person in the room is saying, okay, but if I tell you, if I can sell you on how crazy my spouse is, then you'll throw this whole, EFT thing out, and you can help me tell her she's crazy, And so, so as I'm seeing that, I'm starting to recognize, okay, maybe this is something different. And I start doing a lot of work around personality disorders. So a personality disorder in general is, so personality it's the way that we think, and, it's our feelings. It's kind of our, it's the way we behave, and we all have our own unique personalities. I mean, we understand that. But our personalities are experienced by a lot of different things. We got the whole nature, nurture. We've got experiences. We've got an environment, inherited characteristics. Is somebody born with something, all of that, or is it a mix of all of the above, right? But so let me go all smart here. And according to the American Psychiatric Association, right, a person's personality typically stays the same over time. A personality disorder is a way of thinking, feeling, and behaving that deviates from the expectations of the culture, causes distress or problems functioning, and lasts over time. So what starts to get kind of deep is when you see that I really feel like that listening and empathy component are where things then start to deviate as far as personality goes. So we can all have all of our own experiences and our baggage and all that stuff we bring to the table. And even when I'm talking about this EFT couples therapy, if I'm saying to somebody, here's my thoughts, here's why, I don't know, I'll give you a really silly one that happened a few days ago. Somebody talking about why they don't like dogs because their husband had just brought a giant dog in the house. And so this person's saying, "I don't like dogs," and instead of saying, "Okay, tell me what that's about." And then if the partner says, "Okay, I've always had a fear of dogs. We had a giant dog in our neighborhood that then attacked our little dog. And I'm just scared of them, and they bark. And I was always around these dogs. And a friend of mine had been bitten by a dog and had a scar on her face." And so they're terrible. They're horrifying. And your partner listens and goes, "Oh my gosh, that's heavy. That's deep. I understand. I just thought they'd be fun." Then it's like, okay, so probably not going to get a dog. But if your partner shares all of that, and then, spouse who just got the dog says, "Okay, that's ridiculous. You're an adult, you're a grown up, you need to get over it. And I like dogs." That's the part where it's like, okay, that's that type of personality that kind of deviates maybe from the norm. It deviates from the coming and listening with empathy, I guess. Right. So I'm talking a ton, Celeste. You can cut me off.
Oh, it's great.
Right. But so that background, right? So then I've never really got to talk about this on a podcast. So thank you. I'm going to soapbox for another minute or two.
Of course.
So I think what kind of gets really, really interesting is, I did take another set of notes here. Okay, here's where things get kind of, so a lot of people will say, was the person born with a personality disorder? Did this develop over time? And we kind of now know that a lot of the concepts of personality disorders happen when people are in their childhood. And sometimes we'll even be dramatic and say trauma in their childhood. So I like this. This is, again, from, I think, this is from a Psychology Today article. It says, small children are naturally selfish as a normal part of development in which they get their needs met. They work to get their needs met. They don't understand other people's needs and desires. So little kids, we understand that. It's all about them. As teenagers, kids are still typically self-centered as they struggle for independence, and any parent of a teenager knows that part. But here's where I think things are really interesting. As opposed to self-centeredness that should generally decline, children need to develop healthy, lasting levels of self-esteem to be able to protect and care for themselves. But here's the key: while caring about others, to be able to resist dangerous influences and to stay connected to family and society. So there's this concept of self-esteem versus self-centeredness. So, you can develop self-esteem when you know that you have parents who love you and care about you, and you're raised in an environment that's supportive, and you can go there for trust and safety and security. So you can develop self-esteem. Self-centeredness is something that kind of, it doesn't lead to putting someone else first. What self-centeredness does is it kind of leads to putting yourself first, even at the detriment of others. So most people make this transition from, self-centeredness to maybe self-esteem, or maybe not as much self-esteem, but it really starts to give way to empathy and understanding where other people are at. So when people are kind of locked into that self-centered from childhood, then now we're kind of on the road to personality disorders. So at this point, then, they are locked into this. No, if you understand what I'm dealing with, or what I'm, then you will all understand that, my struggles, and you will all, want to hear me, and you will all understand that the things that you're sharing maybe aren't necessarily as important or relevant or that sort of thing. So there's our primer on personality disorders. And so with narcissism, I did jot down a few things of, how do you know, right? Is that kind of the question then? How do you know if you're...
Yeah.
Okay.
Defining narcissism, and then how do you know if you're married to one? Yeah.
Yeah. So I often kind of run down a little bit of a checklist of, do you often feel controlled, or do you feel like you're manipulated? And a big one is when people feel like they're starting to lose their sense of self. In a healthy relationship, you really do want to edify each other, and all the good cliches of 1 + 1 is 3 and all that kind of stuff. Those are real, where you feel like your partner has your back, they're there for you, and you feel like you could explore anything with your partner. If you're feeling a little bit more controlled or manipulated, or you feel like, okay, my hopes and dreams are now shot because basically my partner's told me that they're ridiculous or they're selfish or that sort of thing. That's when I start to kind of really start to worry about it. Some of the other ones that are pretty fascinating are, does your partner have one set of rules or expectations for him? I'll say him or her. And, the large majority of narcissists are men. That's kind of there's the data that backs that up. There are women narcissists, though. I've worked with plenty of those too. But so do they have their own set of rules, and then yours, that they don't apply to you? I think that's one that becomes pretty common too. Examples are usually around money, so maybe it's, hey, things are really tight. And then he comes home with a set of golf clubs or a new car. And then he's like, but no, this is different. Like, I need these for work, and then it's, okay, well, I don't know, I need clothes for the kids. And he's like, okay, they got a pair of shoes. They can make that last, or, so it's like these different set of rules or expectations. And then I think the big one is, does your partner dismiss your feelings? Do they say that you're crazy, or you're too needy, or you shouldn't feel the way you're feeling, when people around you are saying, no, you're all right. There's that term, I don't know, are you familiar with gaslighting?
Yes. That's what I was about to bring up. Yeah.
Okay. So that's I did a whole episode on that a little while ago, just because one morning I was just kind of fired up because, I just felt like I was just dealing with so many people that are getting gaslit. And, hey, do you know the origin, though, of the term gaslighting, Celeste? Not that you knew you'd be quizzed on your own podcast. This is fun.
It's so funny that you brought that up, because Rich was telling me this 2 months ago, and I completely don't remember, but he did tell me.
Okay. I even thought I knew it, and then I finally looked it up again, and so it was a movie, I think, from the 40s called Gaslight, or Gaslight.
Yes,
Gaslight, right?
That's right.
And then I was even, okay, well, then I knew to say that, but so the way that I guess in the movie, it was before electricity, so there were lamps, that sort of thing, and so the guy would continually lower the light, and he would tell the woman that, no, I didn't do that, so all of a sudden she's thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going crazy, right?
Yeah.
He's saying that the light's still the same intensity, and it's I don't think it is. So what's wrong with me? And so that's the stuff that breaks my heart. When somebody can go into, when somebody can go into a conversation and then leave and they feel like, what's wrong? I changed everything because I don't want to, but I wrote an example of one that was similar to something I heard recently where, let's just say, for example, a wife says to the husband, what do you want for dinner? He says, hey, I'm easy. It doesn't even matter. And then she says, spaghetti. And he says, are you kidding? And then you say, why? What does that mean? And he says, I don't like spaghetti. And then you think to yourself, he's never said that in his whole life. Like, we've had spaghetti many, many times. And so then, of course, then you say, oh, I didn't know that. And I thought you ate spaghetti for years. And then he says, okay, define eating it. If you mean that I move it around my plate and then throw it down the garbage disposal, okay, then maybe that's the case. But so apparently you don't even notice that I don't eat it, which is part of the bigger problem in our marriage, where I don't think you pay attention to me. And I feel like you're the one that is more self-centered and, that sort of thing, right? By the end of the conversation, the woman's saying, oh my gosh, I guess I haven't noticed. And maybe he hasn't liked spaghetti. And it's like, but no, she knows he loves spaghetti. I mean, he basically has a shirt in the closet that says, I love spaghetti, but if she goes and finds that, then he's going to be, I never wanted that shirt to begin with, or that sort of thing. So.
Wow. Good example of something as benign as spaghetti.
I got another one. Okay. And I know that, okay. So this was what I wrote down too. The other that oftentimes they'll blame you for their feelings or their problems. And this was a long time ago. And again, I've changed all the names and all these sort of things. But a person was telling me about, it was a narcissistic in-law that was at their home. And I was reminded of this one because it was around the holidays. And he knocked a drink off of a table. So then, instead of like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, my bad, I knocked the drink off, you can probably guess the person said, what kind of idiot leaves their drink here? And this person said, on a table, probably a lot of, and then of course he was like, well, it was too close to the edge. And with the kids you have in this house, you shouldn't just have glasses. It was like, and the good news was she had been working on this for a while, how to detach. So she just kind of looked at it like, interesting, I believe this is gaslighting. And so, it was pretty powerful. It was.
Wow. Yeah, that is a good example. Okay. So are you ready to take us through some strategies?
Yeah.
Or some common pitfalls, maybe the don'ts of being married to a narcissist?
Yeah, the don'ts are rough. The don'ts are, and it's so hard because what I start doing a lot of is just kind of trying to help people learn to not engage in what I just call the crazy making. And that is so when you know that when you like spaghetti, or that it wasn't silly for you to put a drink on a table, and then just detach. And it's so hard. So the detachment is knowing that I'm not going to, and this is the hardest part. Matter of fact, let me take a step back. There was a few years ago where someone had actually sent me an article, and the article talked about emotionally abusive partners, spouses. And there's just one little part in there, and it was talking about personality disorders, borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, all of these things. And it talked about how the person in the relationship spends their life almost kind of trying to find the thing that they can say or the thing they'll do, where then their partner will have this epiphany or this aha moment. And then they'll go, oh my gosh, you're right. I've been doing this the whole time. I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. And it's almost like that seeking that is that's the crazy making. So, which it can sound so hopeless, but in reality, when you kind of learn that, hey, I'm not crazy, so when they say something that I know is not the case, to detach. It's like, oh, okay, I thought you did, and then if they kind of still try to amp things up, I'm not gonna get in that conversation. And I will say the biggest thing is go get help. Go seek help from a professional. Yeah. I really am a big, go to marriage counseling, try to find somebody that you feel like is pretty competent. I really am a big fan of interviewing your marriage therapist, or these days you can look them up online, make sure they have a modality. EFT is brilliant, but I've done a couple of podcasts on this, and no offense to marriage therapists who are huge on just the reflective listening. But, what can be dangerous about reflective listening is if, your partner says, hey, she knows I never liked spaghetti in the first place and all that stuff, a marriage therapist who maybe doesn't have necessarily a kind of a really nice modality to kind of hold the narcissist in, that reflective listening is going to say, okay, what do you hear your partner saying? Right. And then the wife will say, well, here's that he doesn't like spaghetti. So then, she'll say, okay, and what are you saying? Well, I know he does like spaghetti, and then she'll turn to the narcissist and say, what are you hearing? Well, she said she likes spaghetti, or that I like spaghetti, but she's absolutely wrong, and then it's at that point, then the therapist sits back and goes, okay, so with that information, you guys work that out, right? So it's like you need to have a really solid framework so that, there is a little bit more of kind of some accountability there in the communication. And it gives you a way to say, hey, this isn't going to be a productive conversation. And so, at the advice of our therapist, I'm going to peacefully kind of step back or step out of this one. And because I don't want things to get worse. So it's more of a strength-based thing instead of I'm running away, I'm leaving the conversation, but I don't feel like this is productive. So, I think that we need to step back from this conversation. So you're starting to set some boundaries. So that's one of the biggest things I say is learning how to detach and not look for that home run. Now's the time. I'll tell them this, and then they'll understand everything. Because the most difficult part is if you go back and look at the stuff we talked about earlier, if they really are, coming from this place where maybe they're stunted in childhood, think about when you're, and I feel bad saying this, but the reality is think about when you're talking with a 10-year-old or something, and they can get, if you're saying, hey, you left this out or you did this, they're like, well, you did this, you never did that or whatever, or they can get incredibly mad and then come back in 5 minutes and think, hey, we're good, where you're sitting there, and like, it's not that easy to just say, hey, we're fine. But then, the narcissist might even say, wow, look at you. You're going to hang on to this, huh? You're going to hang this, you're going to hold this over me forever. I mean, it's wild. So you really do need to have a way to detach. It's strength-based, kind of this framework to work from. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I have one question about the detachment.
Yeah.
What's the difference between detachment and just like disengaging or maybe just like retreating? I don't know.
Yeah. And I love that. I feel the big difference is when it's intentional and then when it's been discussed or talked about when the waters are calm. So a lot of times even, when things are okay, and that's the time when a lot of people don't want to bring anything up with, especially, I mean, even with regular couples. I mean, that's one of the things you fight in couples counseling often, where people say, okay, things are going good. I don't want to say, hey, can we talk about that disagreement we had a couple nights ago? Right. Because if you're not actively trying to improve the marriage, then your partner is going to say, why are we bringing this up? We can't get past it.
Rock the boat.
Exactly. But the reality is when the waters are calm, and that's where if we have these nice EFT skills, then we can kind of say, hey, tell me where you were at. Take me on your train of thought of what was going on that night, and if it's a safe time to talk, and they can say, well, I realize now I was frustrated, or I was, kind of projecting on you, or when you said this, whatever it was, I took that personally. And then where your partner can say, okay, I get it. I was actually frustrated from the kids. And so when I did say that, I know that it had some heat to it, but that was not toward you. Those are productive conversations. So when somebody just removes themselves, which I get, and this is where I sometimes feel like all things therapeutic come together. In the world of addiction, there's a concept called harm reduction. And harm reduction is where, you're going to try to reduce the intensity of whatever the addictive thing is, so even with some clients that I have that are, I don't know if there's pornography involved. They're even, trying to reduce from really, and it sounds bad to say, but it's like super bad to maybe more generic or vanilla. I mean, we want to get rid of it altogether, but sometimes, this harm reduction model, even in couples counseling, is if we're going to go from completely removing ourselves, which is better than staying in and fighting, the harm reduction model, that follows and then the next step is we're going to purposely talk about why we're going to disengage. So if somebody has to just walk away to keep their sanity, I get it. I really do. Yeah. And it's, and somebody's going to come after them. You're walking away. You always abandon me or whatever. But if they have to do that or else they know it's not going to go well, I get it. But then the difference is then being able to talk about why and then saying when the waters are calm, I feel like we're not getting anywhere, and so when I feel like I'm about to get in one of those situations, I just want you to know right now, I'm going to walk away and we can talk about it later. I've got a whole podcast called Rules of, I try to make it really clever, constructive communication. But then I made it rock rules of constructive communication, but then I made communication with a K. So it would be, see how clever that is?
Very clever.
I did it at the last minute and then I kind of regretted it, but then it was like, it's out, But in that one, I mean, I kind of talk about some of these things where, you can't just walk away and then just say, we're never going to talk about it. It's really nice to be able to walk away, say, we're going to get back to this. And then when you are, apart, the rule, the theory there is you're going to have a little more empathy for what your partner's going through and that sort of thing. So, so there are
perfect examples. You can disengage from the immediate situation, but then re-engage when it's calm.
Yeah. Yeah. So And so I just think that needs to be a conscious effort and decision.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay. So we're hitting on this a little bit, but do you have any other like effective ways if you think you are married to a narcissist, how to deal with that?
Yeah. So now we kind of move into again, I'm a super strength based guy. So, I never try to plug all of my podcasts. I apologize, but,
No, totally fine.
I've got one called Raising Your Emotional Baseline. It's like, I don't know, episode 11 or 12 or something. And that's something that I just believe in so much. And the concept there is that, it is okay to do self-care. So if you are detaching from the crazy making, and then you're kind of starting to set some boundaries, and now you're working on self-care and all that means, the quick overview is I always say that you're going to be met with all the things that come at you from life every day. And so if your emotional baseline, or if you're feeling good about things, life in general, you're going to respond one way. And if you're feeling super down and your baseline is low, you're going to respond a different way. So the self-care piece helps raise your emotional baseline so that you can, you won't necessarily engage, or you won't respond in a negative way into the crazy making or that sort of thing. So the self-care stuff is, it really is just, I'm a big fan of what are the things that bring you happiness. I'm a big fan of exercise. I'm a huge fan of mindfulness, and doing a nice daily mindfulness practice. For our faith-based religious folks, we got to do some scripture reading and prayer. And I even, sorry, it gets all deep, Celeste. So then I love this concept of acceptance and commitment therapy. And in that world, you got to have your own personal values that even drive your self-care, that drive your goals. If not, it's basically a rule. So like take this study one, for example. If somebody, I don't know, if just sitting down and reading linearly for 15 minutes, isn't them, if they got ADD like myself, or if they're, whatever it is, and they're, then they start like not paying attention, or, they can even leave this self-care thing feeling worse about themselves because I can't even do that right. But if they kind of, if they look at their values first, with the scripture study one, for example, I have a lot of folks that then are, okay, they crave knowledge, excitement, adventure. And so then they're going to say, all right, I'm going to take this 15 minutes. But if I go off on a tangent and I think to myself, I wonder what life was like then, I'm going to Google it, and I want to know, or I want to know who this person is, or I'm going to follow this cross-reference. Or so then I take that 15 minutes of self-care and I actually come out of it and I feel good. I like to give I give an example often of somebody coming to me early on saying, well, I like to read. And then so when they read, they feel like they got to read these heavy, intense, spiritual books or these things for work. And so then when they read those, they don't feel any better. They actually feel worse. So the Raise Your Emotional Baseline version is go read a little bit of, whatever, legal thrillers or 30 minutes of that. And when you're done with that, you enjoy, you feel better. Your baseline's up. And now what's next? So I'm a huge fan of the self-care thing when it comes to, you got to get yourself in a good spot because I want you to know, I think I maybe said to you off the air, maybe in emails, but if you just Google, if you really feel like, I'm in a relationship with a narcissist, and you just Google it, there's not a lot of positive info out there. A lot of it's like a lot of people that have been through it, they're out, they've, and I understand everybody's experience is different and unique, but it's all about where you are right then. So if your goal is to, all right, I want to figure this out, there's tools to do that. I had a guest on my podcast, Christine Hammond, who's been working in the world of narcissism for 20 years. She's written 300 and something articles about it. She has a podcast about it. And I love it in that when she even said, once you realize or recognize kind of how to interact, and you learn how, I'm not going to say the thing that's going to be the epiphany, and I'm going to learn how to detach and disengage. I'm going to build up my, my own self-care. She's like, it's not that difficult because, and I feel bad saying, you're right. Cause you know that you're not the one that's crazy. And then even if you look at I'm maybe emotionally there, and these guys can be captains of industry, attorneys, doctors, whatever, right? Because I was about to say, if you realize they're a little child with their emotions, it's like you even know how to work with that. So I don't know if that makes sense. So I self-care. I have some others where it's like stop making impossible demands on yourself. That's that good concept of, I know it sounds cliched, but we really can't change another person. We can influence, and we can change, and in the nice psychology world, we can change the family system by changing our role in it. So, and that's really what we're trying to do if our self-esteem's up and we detach and we're, that sort of thing. And then, I really do say, just start to find friends, find a lot of narcissists will isolate people, and it's not even necessarily on purpose, but, they know, they feel like if you're talking to somebody else that it's going to be about them, or so, people just end up feeling really isolated. So it's important to develop a support structure, self-care, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, that's a lot, but I hope
that's perfect. No, that's perfect. Those are perfect takeaways, tangible things to do. That's great. Exactly what I was looking for. I did have one more question that I was just kind of trying to think of putting myself into that situation. So I do have a family member who has personality disorder. And for me, one of the biggest struggles is just kind of knowing, okay, when and do I hold them accountable for their actions, and when do I just give them grace and say that's just a personality disorder?
Oh, that's such a good question. Okay, so I'm supposedly the pro, right? And when I'm working with people, maybe let's say somebody that I'm close with, and it's the same thing is, at some point, I feel like there are times it's so cliched. You learn to pick your battles, right? And sometimes I even say, if you know that there's nothing that you can do or say, and that holding that boundary is in essence going to just, start a war or that sort of thing, then I am a big fan of trying to disengage as quickly as you can and not hold them accountable. But I do feel like where we go back to the beginning, where then people start to lose their sense of self. And I feel like that comes a lot of times from when somebody feels like, narcissists are really good at, they get people to join in. So if you don't say anything, or they're going to kind of bring you into their world, so they might say, I'll give such a lame example of this, but if, trying to not say so some of the things you hear are crazy, but if, okay, no, here's one. So if you're talking to this person and they even say, well, how, we all hate your cousin, and you're like, no, I don't, I don't at all. That's one of those where it's like, okay, I'm going to put my boundary up, and that's where I'm going to hold them accountable. And it's like, hey, that's not me. And I want you to know, if you feel like that's the way I represented this, or I've told you that, I want to know right now, so those are the times where I feel like it is okay to hold your boundary or hold them accountable. If they're just saying stuff like, I don't know, I can't even think of a good example off the top of my head, but go back to that rule of, if it's about just disengaging, if it's about you just kind of saying, okay, you know what, I'm gonna put my foot down, and they got to know that this is not okay. And it's just one of those kind of things where maybe this will be the time that they will understand. And it's something that really isn't necessarily something that's important to you. And that's where I kind of feel like, all right, not necessarily the case. I would be curious if you can kind of dance around or cover up a little bit of maybe an example of where the question, one of these times where it might be, see what I'm doing here, Celeste?
Yeah.
Is it too much on the spot?
No, it's fine. Well, just like this person doesn't have a job and is kind of draining everybody's resources around them, and doesn't I don't know, it's at what point do you just be like, hey, enough, you can do this, versus no, you can't do this. I don't know.
This is so good. All right. I'm glad you put it that way. So, first of all, I'm a big, again, we're going to put our boundaries up because, drain in finances, that sort of thing it's real, right? I think this is the time, and actually I was going to say this earlier, so I'm so glad you went to this. One of the biggest things you can do is when you start to look at a personality disorder from a place of empathy, instead of a place of, I have to show them or I have to prove them, or this antagonistic relationship. So when you look at it from a place of empathy, and I'm going to go back real quick. When I was still early on in therapy, I would get people at times where I felt like no matter what I would say, they would tell me they've done that, they've tried that, that doesn't work, that sort of thing. So I still remember this very well. At the time, I think I was, so I still had the company I was running by day. I was doing some therapy by, night. I had 4 kids. I was doing my little ultra marathon running. I was teaching seminary. I was speaking everywhere.
Whoa.
And then I'm sitting in front of somebody, and they're like a single person who are saying, yeah, I've got this part-time job and it's killing me. Nobody knows what this is like. It's so hard. It's whatever. And I would just sit there on the inside going, are you freaking kidding me? And I remember I'd be like, so how about you just do this, this, and this, and a therapist's job is not to tell them what to do. And I remember going to my clinical supervisor and saying, what do you do, in one of these situations where, somebody's just continually saying, this doesn't work. And he just said, he was like, yeah, you got to go back to empathy. You got to do more empathy work. And I remember I sat I felt like weeks on, tell me more about that. That really must be hard. What is that like to, I don't know, get to bed at 9 and have to wake up at, 7 the next morning, or, that must really be difficult, doing a whole bunch of that empathy work. And to the point where the person finally was kind of like, wait a minute, does it sound like I'm making excuses? And I had to do the whole, wait, I don't know. I hadn't even thought about that. Do you want me to be the person that kind of calls you on that, or, that sort of thing. And it was really cool. So sometimes I think of, in that situation you're telling, is if you can look at that from an empathetic standpoint, everybody's telling them what they're supposed to be doing. So they're firing back with, that doesn't work. I tried that. That person hates me. I already tried, so that's not going to get anywhere. That's still everybody trying to shoot for this. Oh, if I tell them to do this, then, they'll do it, right? So sometimes I feel like, and it's going to take the patience of Job, mind you, but to kind of try to understand, all right, hey, tell me what that's like trying to get a job there, or tell me the frustrations, and then it's more when they feel like you hear them, then that's the only time where you have a chance to, all right, hey, what if we did this, or what if instead of it's you need to do this, or I ran to that too, and I did this and it worked, because they're still viewing that as, it's basically like you're the adult telling the little kid, it's like, just go do that, that sort of thing. That makes sense. Does that make any sense?
Totally. Yeah, totally. I have played that role before and
have you?
gotten nowhere. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and this is where the therapist can make everything sound like I got all the answers, right? Watch this. I'll do it really well. Okay. In the role of a lifetime now, I will say, Celeste, that means that you haven't put in enough time doing that. See what I did there? I've always got an answer. Yeah. But I mean, it really is. I mean, that's the part that's kind of maddening. I mean, and because one can honestly feel like, and sometimes you do feel like when you're working with somebody with a personality disorder, I even was saying this earlier today, it's like this bottomless, well of you're trying to get to the bottom of giving them empathy in that situation, and then you'll hit the bottom, and then finally it's like, whew, okay, now we can do the work, and sometimes, again, we're not gonna say the thing or do the thing, but with the empathy piece, at least this person's gonna feel like they don't have to continually defend themselves. So at some point the theory there is, all right, we can help. But you're right. I mean, there's still going to be situations where, at least that you did your part, and now let's put those boundaries back up.
Right. And something that Jody Moore said really helped me with the empathy thing, because I think she said, like, okay, if I were thinking their thoughts, what would I be feeling? And before, I think I was focusing on, you're thinking the wrong thoughts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wrong. And they're incorrect. And here's why. Instead of like, oh, you really think this. Okay, then I would be feeling this. And that was like really, okay, that's more helpful.
I give this real cheesy example, maybe you've heard it before, but, I remember in grad school where if, you get the professor had, I don't know, the therapist on one side of the room and the client on the other. And they just said, most of us want to say, like, just move, and you got a whole bunch of obstacles in the way. And you're just like, move around there, go over there, and she said, the person's not learning anything. They're eventually going to tell you that, hey, I don't want to do that, or that doesn't work for me. And so this person said, okay, you're basically taking this role of you're right beside them, and you're walking up to the chair and you're saying, all right, you got a chair in front of you. Tell me what's going on here. And they're going to say, right, I'm frightened of chairs. I'm not going to step over that chair. My parents were, I don't know, now it sounds a little dark, but I would say murdered in a chair factory when I was a kid. And, this chair held me in every day, all these things. So they're like, wow, okay. So, what do we want to do? And they're like, I want to run back to the beginning and take another route. All right, I get it now, or as good as I can. To me, it's like, okay, well, it's a chair. Let's move it, And so, so it's like, you're thinking that, okay, their thoughts are crazy. I love that. Their thoughts are crazy. But, back to this Christine Hammond podcast I had on her, she said that you got to think of all narcissists are viewing the world through these yellow lens glasses, but they can't take them off. I mean, they are fused to their eyes. And I love that one, because then we can even be arguing of like, hey, this is green. And they're saying that is yellow, and you can get everybody around you to say it's green. And they're like, man, you guys are all a bunch of, goofs, because it is as yellow as it comes. I know, I'm seeing it, So yeah, kind of wild.
Yeah, that's a great example. The glasses fused. I love that. That's a great example. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all your help and expertise, Tony. You've given us so much to think through and so many helpful takeaways. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And I'm grateful that I did not have to sing.
You're welcome. Next time.
Hey, all right. Thanks, Celeste.